Right now, the 2016 election is back in the headlines after FBI Director James Comey's bombshell testimony on why he alerted Congress to newly discovered Hillary Clinton emails less than 2 weeks before the election.
Look, this is terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election. But honestly, it wouldn't change the decision. Everybody who disagrees with me has to come back to October 28th with me and stare at this and tell me what you would do. Would you speak or would you conceal? And I could be wrong, but we honestly made a decision between those two choices that even in hindsight, and this has been one of the world's most painful experiences, I would make the same decision.
Joining me now is Fox News media analyst Howard Kurtz. Howie, there was that moment. There was also the moment where he said that he thought the Justice Department had no credibility because the capper, in his words, was that meeting on the tarmac. I mean, what did you make of that whole scene the other day?
First of all, Comey, Hillary, WikiLeaks, Russia, it seems like we were in a time machine and we're all reliving the 2016 election. I have to say, James Comey, with that testimony, seems to have made just about everybody in Washington mildly nauseous. I mean, people on the left mostly are upset with him because they didn't feel he had a very good explanation, as anguished as he seemed, for making public the renewed investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails in that final stretch of the campaign. Turned out to be nothing. And people on the right, commentators and others, are still upset with him for not bringing an indictment in the email case in the first place.
Yeah, it's amazing. If I could bring you some breaking news that Catherine Herridge is reporting right now, that Comey also pressed for that anti-Trump dossier in a classified Russia report, that he wanted to include it, that he considered it to be so important that he insisted the document be included in January's final intelligence community report. What do you think of that?
I would actually like to know more about why he wasn't able to include it and whether he was overruled. But, you know, this speaks to the fact that Comey had two very big hot potatoes on his hands, the Hillary Clinton email investigation, where he said, you know, she was reckless and so forth, but chose not to bring criminal charges. But there also, we now know, I didn't know at the time, that during the campaign, the FBI was also looking into alleged possibly improper contacts between Trump associates and Russia. That still remains kind of murky, and a lot of people on the left are unhappy that that didn't become public, that FBI part of it at least, until after the election.
What do you think? I mean, you're someone obviously who studies and reports on the media, and I guess one of my big questions in the wake of all this is, what do you make of what I now think of as the chattiest FBI director of all time? I mean, we have heard more from him than I feel like in my lifetime we've heard from another FBI director, net now. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, you know, I used to cover the Justice Department. I have covered many prosecutors. Usually they don't talk very much unless they bring charges and then they have a press conference. So the fact that he even had this extraordinary press conference when he decided not to press charges against Hillary Clinton was unusual, to say the least. And look, if he's called to testify on the Hill, obviously he's got to do that. But it does seem that Comey occupies a very odd space right now where he's trying to salvage his own reputation, that of the FBI. He's made a series of controversial decisions that, whether he liked it or not, it did impact the campaign. I'm not saying it through the election one or another. And then you have Hillary Clinton this week at a public appearance saying, you know, I'd be your president if it wasn't for James Comey. She said she took full responsibility for the loss. She didn't talk about her lack of a message. She didn't talk about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. She prefers to point the finger again at James Comey. So he's looming very large, and as you say, yes, much more talkative than most people who run that bureau.
Let me ask you about that real quick before we go. I mean, she sat there and said she was on her way to becoming president, and then two things happened. You know, and I wonder, as I watched this interview that she did with Christiane Amanpour, that it's very painful for everyone to watch, no matter what side you're on. If you were rooting for her, if you were not rooting for her, you know, watching this interview sort of made you want to rip your hair out. What is the point of doing this?
Well, I think she's trying to vindicate herself for losing a race that most Democrats thought that she would easily win against Donald Trump. And it seems to me that, yeah, sure, I mean, Comey's announcement dominated the news coverage and stopped whatever momentum she had, but her real problem is she had no core economic message, no ability to speak to the working class voters in those Rust Belt states won by the Republican candidate, and she doesn't seem quite able to admit that.
All right, Howie, we got to go. Thank you so much. We'll be watching you on Sunday. MediaBuzz. Thank you.
Thanks.